Hey everyone, today we're diving into one of Japan's most intense and chaotic periods of history, the Ōnin War. Imagine this, it's the Muromachi period in Japan, and from 1467 to 1477, the country is torn apart by a massive civil war. It all starts with a big clash between a high-ranking official named Hosokawa Katsumoto and a powerful regional lord, Yamana Sōzen. This conflict spirals out of control, dragging the entire nation into a brutal struggle for power. The Ōnin War marks the beginning of what's known as the Sengoku period, or the Warring States period. This was a time when various feudal lords, known as daimyōs, fought fiercely to control Japan. So, how did this all start? It began with a dispute over who would succeed the shogun, Ashikaga Yoshimasa. Back in 1464, Yoshimasa didn't have an heir and persuaded his younger brother, Ashikaga Yoshimasa, to leave his monk life and become his successor. But then, in 1465, Yoshimasa had a son named Yoshihisa, throwing everything into chaos. Suddenly, there were two factions, one supporting the shogun and his brother, and the other backing Yoshihisa's mother, Hino Tomiko, along with her ally, Yamana Sōzen. Tomiko wanted to rule as regent until her son, Yoshihisa, was old enough to take over. She got support from powerful samurai leaders, while Yoshimi had the backing of the influential Hosokawa clan. The war wasn't just about the succession of the shogun. There were also conflicts within other powerful families, like the Hatakeyama and Shiba clans, which added more fuel to the fire. Tensions finally exploded in 1467, with Hosokawa Katsumoto leading the Eastern Army and Yamana Sōzen leading the Western Army. Initially, the Eastern Army supported Yoshimi, while the Western Army backed Yoshihisa. But things got even more complicated when Yoshimi, who hated the war, fled to seek refuge with the Kitabate clan. This move caused a rift between him and Yoshimasa. By 1468, the sides had flipped. The Eastern Army now supported Yoshihisa, and the Western Army backed Yoshimi. And Hosokawa's Eastern Army, with around 85,000 troops, and Yamana's Western Army, with about 80,000, were nearly evenly matched as they mobilized near Kyoto. The fighting kicked off in March when a Hosokawa mansion was set ablaze. By May 1467, a Yamana mansion faced a fierce attack. The chaos escalated further in July, with heavy fighting that destroyed hundreds of large buildings. Hosokawa's forces got cornered in the northeast part of Kyoto around his mansion, while Yamana's troops controlled the south and west. In September, Yamana's forces received a significant boost with 20,000 reinforcements under Auchi Masahiro. Despite this, Hosokawa managed to secure the sovereign and the abdicated emperor to the Bakufu from the emperor's palace, right before Yamana's 50,000 troops seized it. Further reinforcements for Hosokawa came from the Akamatsu clan. A turning point occurred on November 1st, when Yamana's forces captured the Shokoku-ji temple after bribing a monk. The chronicles of the time describe the situation as dreadful, with the two sides facing each other without significant action for the rest of the year. Hosokawa attempted to break the deadlock with an attack on New Year's Day and another in April, but mostly, the armies just glared at each other across a central trench 10 feet deep and 20 feet wide. Several monasteries were burned, including the Tenryuji. By 1469, Yoshimi switched allegiances to Yamana's side, forcing the shogun to declare his son Yoshihisa as his heir. This switch turned the war into a battle of brother against brother. The Emperor Go-Tsushimikado stripped Yoshimi of his court ranks and declared him a rebel. Even after the deaths of Yamana Sōzen and Hosokawa Katsumoto in 1473, the war dragged on. Eventually, the Yamana clan began to lose morale under the label of rebel. Auchi Masahiro, a Yamana general, burned down his section of Kyoto and withdrew in December 1477. After 10 brutal years, Kyoto was reduced to ruins, a place for mobs to loot. Neither the Yamana nor the Hosokawa achieved their goals, merely depleting each other's forces. During this turmoil, the shogun, Ashikaga Yoshimasa, was notably detached, indulging in poetry readings and cultural pursuits, and planning the construction of Genkaku-ji, the Silver Pavilion. His complacency during the war effectively sanctioned private wars among other daimyo, spreading conflict throughout Japan. The battles in Kyoto had stopped, but the war's influence spread. In Yamashiro province, the Hatakeyama clan's infighting led to a significant peasant and Jizumorai revolt in 1485, forming the Yamashiro Ikki. By 1486, they had set up a provisional government in Yamashiro province. Other Ikki movements sprang up, like in Kaga province, where the Jodo Shinshu Buddhist sect, the Ikko, revolted against their warlord Togashi Mashika. By 1488, they had taken control of Kaga province and fortified their headquarters along the Yodo River. These uprisings were part of a broader outbreak of civil war, reflecting widespread discontent among the lower classes. This period, known as Gekokuho, or the low oppressed the high, saw peasants rising up in various regions, driven by their grievances. After the Ōnin War, the Ashikaga Bakufu essentially disintegrated. The Hosokawa family took control, turning the Ashikaga shoguns into mere puppets. When Yoshimi's son, Yoshitein, became shogun in 1490, the Hosokawa deputy forced him to flee in 1493 and installed another Ashikaga, Yoshizumi, as shogun. By 1499, Yoshitein found refuge in Yamaguchi, the capital of the powerful Ouchi family, who then supported him militarily. In 1507, the assassination of Kanrei Hosokawa Masamoto led to further chaos. The following year, Yoshizumi left Kyoto, and the Ouchi restored Yoshitein as shogun. This marked the beginning of a series of bizarre conflicts over the control of the puppet government. After Masamoto's death, his adopted sons, Takakuni and Sumamoto, fought over the Kanrei succession. Sumamoto himself was a puppet of one of his vassals, illustrating a recurring theme in post-Ōnin War Japan: wars over puppet governments rather than high ideals or territorial greed. The Hosokawa family maintained control over the shogunate until 1558, when they were betrayed by the Miyoshi family. The powerful Ouchi were also defeated by a vassal, Mori Motonari, in 1551. By the end of the Warring States period, only a dozen or so warlord families remained. The most significant development from the Ōnin War was the continuous civil war spreading beyond the capital city. Hosokawa, for instance, tried to incite strife in the Ouchi domains, which eventually forced the Ouchi to submit and leave. From the end of the Ōnin War, civil strife, vassals challenging their daimyo, and succession disputes involving outside daimyo became endemic throughout Japan. Scholars debate whether Warring States period is an appropriate term. Some argue that since Japan remained nominally unified under the emperor and shogunate, it was more a period of warring warlords than warring states. However, others, like Mark Ravina, Mary Elizabeth Berry, and Conrad Topman, suggest that the provinces operated like quasi-independent states, making the term Warring States period fitting. The prolonged conflict weakened many Japanese warlords, paving the way for the unification efforts by the three great figures of Japanese history, beginning with Oda Nobunaga. This century of strife ultimately made it easier for them to establish a unified military government.